Everybody say hello.
Morning, Mr.
Hello,
Mug.
Mr. Mug. For those, that's funny. Oh no. For those of you that do not know, you may not have been here. Mr. Mug is the mascot for our current series, which is called "It Came From Within." And you may wonder, why in the world do we have a mascot? And the reason is that Mr. Mug's kind of the visual. He's a representative of the series. But the truth is, we kind of learned every one of us, kind of at one point or another, has been Mr. Mug. And the thing that I want you to kind of take from it is the thing we want to learn from Mr. Mug is that every single one of us, deep down inside of us, we have stuff. Okay? We have stuff that we really don't want other people to see. And it's stuff that we don't want to come out of us in the form of maybe our words or our actions or attitudes that we have or even emotions. And so what we do is we create a complex set of filters that are designed to keep that stuff deep down inside us where it should stay so that it doesn't come bubbling out. And for those people that say, well, I don't have filters, I'm unfiltered, you're a liar, because we all have filters. Because what we have learned over years of experience is that we've got to develop these filters if we want to get a job, keep a job, get married, date somebody, have friends, whatever. You got to find ways to keep some of that stuff that's deep down inside you, and not have it bubble out at the most inopportune time. And so that's where we develop these filters. But I think what we've also learned, and what we have learned from Mr. Mug, is that there are times when we get maybe stressed, we get frustrated, we get complacent, and what happens? In those moments, all of a sudden, our filters fail. And when they do, this stuff just comes flying out all over everybody. Maybe in what we say, maybe in what we do. But, you know, the thing is that what do we do then? We tend to double down on our filters. We try to improve our filter, control our mouths, because we think that that is the source of the problem. But what we've learned is that throughout this series, you know, Jesus gave us a principle to live by. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 34, he says what? He says, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And what he's saying is that these things that come out are not because we have maybe a language problem, or we've got an attitude problem, or we've got a, you know, whatever it is. It's not a frustration problem. It's not a, it's a heart problem. Plain and simple. Because out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. In other words, what comes out of our mouths, what comes out in our actions, what comes out of the way that we respond to people is not necessarily a self-control issue or a language issue or anything else. It is a heart issue. And so, you know, what we do is we have these, we've all had it. Anybody, you had that moment where you say something and all of a sudden, oh, I don't know where that came from. You ever said it? Or you do something and you're like, I am so sorry. I never get that upset. I never react that way. I'm normally not like her. Something just happens completely out of character. You know, you just kind of lose control. You're like, I never do that. Anybody said it? Okay. And the one thing we always say, and I love it, then we go, I don't know where that came from. That's the last little bit, like we really don't have a clue. And Jesus says, I do. It came from your evil heart. See, we don't like having our heart called evil, do we? But you know what it is? It is. And that's what we have been talking about throughout the course of these series. And so, instead of working on our filters, what we've learned is that, you know, we need to heed the words of Solomon. Wisest man to ever live. Solomon said what? He said, above all else, in other words, above everything else I've taught you, guard your heart. Why should you guard your heart? Because it is the wellspring of life. Everything we are, everything we do, everything we say, everything that we respond comes from that hidden place, our heart. And so today we're going to be covering a series that honestly will make some of you uncomfortable. If you have not been to church, if this is like a first time here, or if you haven't been to church in a long time, this may make you uncomfortable. If you were here last week, this may still make you a little uncomfortable. And the reason I say that is because what we're talking about today is the attitude of, you hadn't got it by the title, greed. And the reason I say it is because whenever the preacher stands up and starts to talk about money or stuff, the assumption by everybody sitting out there in the blue chairs is that means I am going to talk about this because it's all about you giving more of your money and your stuff to the church, because we have to have more of your stuff and more of your money, that God needs you to give more. And I'm just going to say this right here, right now, that's not what this is about. Okay? This is not about, the church needing more of your money. This is not about God needing all of your stuff. This is about the attitude in our heart of greed. And I know we all say, I'm not a greedy person. And I think the reason is because we get real confused about what greed is. We have this image in our head that when I say greedy people, you probably think of two people, and it all depends upon your age. You either immediately conjure up the image of Ebenezer Scrooge or Mr. Krabs. It's an age thing. See, I got people over here like, who in the world is Mr. Krabs? And if more kids were out here, they'd be, who in the world is Ebenezer Scrooge? That's what we get in this. If we talk about greedy people, what do we think of? We think of, nasty, miserly old coots that just hang on to everything that they've got, that don't let anything go, that live in almost nearly poverty, so that they can hoard and amass everything that they've ever had come to them. They sleep with their money, they count it 5 times a day. And I'm not like that, so I'm not greedy. Right? I know greedy people, and I'm not one of them, so I'm not greedy. The fact is, though, that when Jesus talks about greed, he's addressing that, but very seldom does he talk about that kind of greed, because there are other types, more subtle, and honestly, the more subtle it is, the more dangerous it is, because we don't always see it. So Jesus says this in Luke chapter 12, verse 15. He says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And now hear this. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And like I said, the fact is that whether we recognize it or not, I think all of us in one way or another, we suffer from different forms of greed. The problem is that greed, like all the rest of the things that we're going to be talking about, is something that if it is left unchecked, it will fester, it will grow, it will destroy relationships, it has the ability to destroy you, and it has the ability to keep you from having a relationship with Jesus Christ. And when I say that there are subtle forms of greed that we know, we think of like super, super greedy people. I'm not one of them, that's not me. But you know what we all probably say is, I'm not greedy. We're not greedy, we're just careful. Okay? We're not greedy. We're just saving for the future. We're not greedy. We just want to protect what we have worked hard for. We're not greedy. We just want to protect our stuff or our this. The Bible does not say that we are not allowed to save for the future. The Bible doesn't say that we have to sell everything that we got, give it all away. It doesn't say you can't save for your kids' college. It says that we are to be good stewards of our finances, good stewards of our resources without becoming greedy. I heard a phrase one time, and I loved it. The Bible never says that we are not allowed to have money or to own possessions. The key is not to let our money and our possessions own us. See, that's the difference. Because that's when it becomes, and that's why we say that greed is not a money issue. Greed is not a wallet issue. Greed it's not a possessions issue. Greed is a heart issue. And, here's where in America, we've been sold this bill of goods that we buy into, but far too many of it. If somebody were to just fly over and they didn't speak the language, but they were up way above one of our American cities, they would probably get the idea that basically our lives consist of, going to work. We go someplace, we spend some time. When we're done, we exchange our time for some paper stuff. And then we take that paper stuff and we would go to stores that are filled with all kinds of stuff, and we would exchange that paper stuff for some other stuff, and then we would take it home to these places that we call our houses, and we would set it up and decorate. We'd put it everywhere, some inside, some outside, and this kind of cycle would continue. And then at some point, the little houses, our stuff, they would get too full, and so we would go and we would spend some of that paper stuff to get these blue totes, and we would put a bunch of stuff in it, and then we would take it to a big building where a lot of other people store their stuff too, so that we would have more room. And then we could go back to the stores that have the stuff, and we could get some more to come and to put it in place of the stuff where now we have empty places in our house. And then every once in a while, in the course of the cycle, we would stop and trade some of that paper stuff for some other stuff that we would like stick in a hole in our face, and then we would go on, we would do that again. Does that not sound that's kind of in some cases the sum of our life? Okay? But Jesus says that's not how it's supposed to be. He said that our life is not supposed to be about the acquisition and the amassing of stuff. And I'll be honest, I'm no better than anybody else. I can go into Lowe's or I can get on eBay for like 10 minutes to waste some time, and all of a sudden I find that thing that I have to have. And granted, 10 minutes earlier, I did not know it existed. But now that I know it exists, I cannot live without it. I have to have it. I do. But we have been sold this bill of goods, especially in American society, that our life consists of the pursuit of bigger, shinier, faster, newer. That's what we have to have. And if you don't have that one, or if you don't perfect that look, or if you haven't created this set of finances, that somehow your life is meaningless. That's what our life is about. And it was funny, I heard a story. There were these two boys, two brothers, 10 years old, 5 years old, and they go walking into Walgreens one day, and they take up there and lay on the counter to buy. They got a box of tampons. And so, the guy behind you goes, "Oh, okay, you picking these up for your mother?" "No." "Your sister?" "No." "Who are they for?" The 10-year-old says, "Well, they're for him." Yes. "Do you know what these are? Do you know what they're for?" He says, "Yeah. Because we're watching TV and the commercial said that if you buy these, then you could swim, bike, and play tennis." And you can't do any of those things now. It's true. It is. We have been sold day in and day out a bill of goods that says that if we buy certain things, that our lives will be. Ready to get your attention? No. But isn't that what we've been told? That as long as we get the right stuff, it makes life perfect. But here's where I think that we have a problem. And this is why Jesus says, to be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And when he says that, it's because your life does not consist in the acquisition and the abundance of your stuff and of your possessions and how much money you have. And I think there is a principle here that we have problems with at times, okay? And it's something I kind of want you to understand. I think we see many times, we see spending and giving as two different things, okay? And here's what I mean. We watch the news, we see something, and we see whatever it is. We see natural disasters, or we see war or poverty, or what, something that happens around the world. And what happens? Okay, our heart goes out for these people. Oh my goodness, our heart breaks for them. We're just, we see it and we know that something has to be done. But then we watch on the TV and the tag shows up at the bottom that has a website that you can go to give, or we see the scrolling across the bottom, or we walk by the red kettle out in front of Walmart, or we get the phone call that is telling us that we can, can you make a donation of $5 or $50 or $500? And what do we say? We're like, oh man, my heart breaks for them. Oh, that is so horrible. I'm overwhelmed, but I just don't have the cash. I just don't have it with me. Never mind the fact that we just spent 2.5 hours the day before with our accountant trying to figure out how we could buy a $50,000 vehicle in order to get a tax deduction this year so that we could save $2,000 on our taxes. Never mind that we've got an Excel spreadsheet set out to make sure that we do actually put $10,000 worth of everyday stuff onto our American Express so that we can get the free miles, so that we can take that vacation, which we're going to then put on our Discover card because it has 0% interest, which will then give us the ability to roll that into a home equity loan that we can pay off in only 15 short years. My heart breaks for those people. I feel for them, but I just don't have it. And, when we say that, Jesus would tell us, you're greedy. Because what's happened is, and this is where we get confused, because our heart hurts for them. We feel for them. We have empathy. We have sympathy. I mean, we cry when we watch the commercials. And so we feel like our heart is in the right place, don't we? If we had it, we'd give it. If we could afford it, we'd do it. If only. That's greed, because we see spending and giving as two different things. And that's why Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 6. And this is a passage, man, keep this. Matthew 6, verse 19 through 22 is where we're going to be. But I would tell you, fine, because once again, Jesus is saying greed is not a money issue. It's not a wallet issue. It's not a possessions issue. It is a heart issue. So he says this, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. And like I said, he's not saying you can't save for a rainy day. He's not saying that you can't save for your kids' education. What he's saying is that don't allow the measuring stick for your life to be the number of zeros in your bank account. Don't make the valuation of your self-worth based upon how much stuff you have in your house or your garage or anywhere else. That's what he's saying. It's not about your possessions. And so he says, instead of storing up treasure here on earth, because the fact is, you know what? You don't get to take it with you no matter how hard you try. You're going to leave it behind. Yes, you may leave it behind to your kids, but you're leaving it behind either way. End of story. So he says, store up treasure instead of on earth, store it up in heaven, where it is eternal and where it will be waiting for you. Okay? And then but he continues, and here's why this is important. So you realize, he says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal, because there are a lot of needy people out there that need your help. And the point is that what he is trying to tell is that not what yours says? Is that not what your Bible says? It's like, see who's reading along. Oh, hold on. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Oh, well, that changes everything. This is Rosanna Dana says, never mind. This is a principle that we get. We may not like it. See, and now I know, then, because I got people that are looking at her and go, Rosanna Dana, who was that? We may not like this principle, but we understand this principle. Because the fact is that we all know that if somebody were to be given access to our checkbook registry or our credit card statement or to receipts of where we had spent money, it wouldn't take them long to figure out what's important to us, would it? No. Because what we know, what do? The things that are important to us are what we spend money on. We invest in what is important to us. It's a principle that we completely understand. But it's like when if you invest in a stock somewhere and you don't even know what they make, you don't know who they are, where they are. All you know is that there's 3 letters that scroll across the bottom of your screen, and so you're paying attention. Does it have an arrow that says up or an arrow that says down, or is it whatever? I mean, like I said, you don't know anything about it. You just know that now that you're invested in them, you care, and so you watch. I remember when I was growing up, I used to scare my parents to death when I would drive. And for a couple of reasons. One, if we would be on I-70 or whatever, you'd have a truck would go beside me, and my dad would almost want to reach over to grab it because I would start drifting towards the truck. Or on a 2-lane road when they're coming out, I would start to kind of drift that way. But what we figured out is the fact that I did that because we are gravitated towards what we look at. And so even though I'm supposed to be looking at the road, I see this truck and I'm concerned about this truck, and so what am I doing? I'm paying attention to this truck, and I just naturally start kind of gravitating over there. But that's the way it is with everything, okay? What we look at and what we're paying attention, and this is, like I said, that's not a new principle that only has to do with cars. Jesus has been teaching about this for thousands of years when he's telling us that wherever our treasure is where our heart's going to be. Where we put our money is where we are going to put our heart. That's what is going to be important to us. It's what we're going to be drawn to. It's what we're going to pay attention to. And that's why he tells us to be on your guard. Okay? That's why he's be on your guard against all types of greed. But in verse 22, he makes this statement, and I want to dig into there's all kinds of stuff we could dig into here. But in verse 22, he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. And this goes to what I was talking about of me watching the trucks. The eye of the lamp is the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And that kind of sounds like it's coming completely out of left field, doesn't really seem to tie in with everything else. But when you get into it, what you find is the word that Jesus uses there for good, it's a Greek word that he uses for good. And every other time that it is translated, it's translated as generous. Okay? Now, the word that he uses then, for bad in Matthew 20 verse 15 later on, he used that word to mean envious. So in other words, think about this. What he's saying is that if your eyes are generous, then the light within you is good. But if your eyes are envious, in other words, greedy, then the light within, it'll be darkness inside you. And once again, we get this, but it goes back to the whole point that what we look at, what we think about, what we see is where we're going to be drawn to. Okay? But at the same time, let me ask you a question. Have you ever met a truly generous person who was not joyful and happy? Have you? I'm taking that as a no. Have you ever met a truly greedy person who wasn't just miserable? Why? Because the generous person has a joyful heart, whereas that greedy person has a heart that is cold, that's dead. And what we learn is that generosity, just like greed, is a heart issue. It's not a money issue. We all the time, well, if I had more, then I'd give it. Boy, when I hit it rich, then I'm going to be generous. No, you won't. If you're greedy when you got $10 in your pocket, you're going to be greedy with $10,000 in your pocket. Sorry. It's the way it's going to be. A generous heart and a greedy heart are both heart issues. Okay? It's not a case of money. It's not a wallet issue. The thing is, though, that most greedy people don't see it in themselves. Okay? We couch it, we phrase it in different ways. And maybe not, because I know there's not a single greedy person in here. Why not? No, we're not, none of us are. None of us are. But we all know somebody. Okay? We all know somebody. And chances are we know, well, think about this. Because other people see in us what we don't see in ourselves. Chances are we all know that one person that if you ever go over to their house or if you ever do anything with them, everybody in the room knows you don't touch whatever. Nobody plays with that thing. Those are for display only. Everybody get it? We all know somebody like that, don't we? And what would we call that? Greedy little. Would we? Almost. No, we would call them greedy. But here's the deal, and here's my point, because this is what I want you to think about for a second. Have you ever thought about why it is that maybe certain people don't ever ask you to give of your, I don't care, finances, of your time, of your talents, or of your possessions? You ever thought about that? Could it maybe be that those people see something in you that you don't see? That maybe those people see as they are looking at you that to you, your time, your talent, your possessions, your finances are more important to you than they are. What would you call that? It's called greed. It's exactly what it is. And so, like I said, once again, I know this is where everybody says, well, great. I feel wonderful now. I get all dressed up to come in and get called greedy. And for those of you that are visiting, or haven't been, you're thinking this is where he's going to pass the plate again. Nope. Not going to. But I'm going to tell you, though, I think that this is where there's a principle that I think we need to lay hold of. Because one of the things that Jesus tells us, he says, there, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Whatever you look at, it is going to be what you are drawn to. And so what I want you to think about is, for a moment here, here's the deal. If that is the case, if we know that where our treasure is, that's where our heart is going to be, you know what that principle tells us as well? It tells us that we can use these to direct this. Think about that. You can use these to direct this. You can use your possessions and where you invest it, your finances and where you put it, to direct your heart. Okay? And what I mean, this is the principle that I would like for you to take from this. Because if you will make the decision to be generous, and this goes back to application somewhere in a visible, physical, tangible way. What the Bible is telling us, what Jesus is telling us is that if you have a hard time with being generous, if you feel like there is greed in your heart, okay, I know what we would love to do is we want a magic prayer. We want to pray and say, oh, God, give me a generous heart, and boom, and it's going to be fixed. You know what I think happens most times? I think that when we say, God, I want a generous heart. Because, I want to be more generous with my finances. And I think the response that we get is, okay, here's what I want you to do. Write a big check and give it away. And our response is, God, I can't do that. I'm greedy. He said, no. So write a check, give it away. Say, God, you're not listening. You're not listening. I'm greedy. I can't do that. But give me a generous heart, and I'll write a big check and I'll give it away. And he says, no. Write a big check and give it away, and it'll begin to break out the greed in your heart. And it's the same way with our time, with our talents, with our possessions. And so the principle I kind of want you to understand is what's called priority percentage giving. It happens with our finances, but it happens with our time and with our talents. Take a percentage and make it a priority of any of those things that you struggle with. Make a conscious decision that you're going to start taking it out of your kingdom and investing it in His. Whether it is a percentage of your income, whether it is a certain amount of time in your day,